This is WZRD Chicago, 88.3 FM. And we have with us at WZRD, Melissa Lorraine of Theatre Y. How are you today, Melissa?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Very well, thank you. First of all, Melissa, tell us a little bit about Theatre Y.
Sure. So I started Theatre Y 18 years ago, and it has been a continually evolving company that perpetually asks what it is that we're doing and why, and what we're here in the community to do. So we have changed our identity many times over the years by nature, but we are recently located in North Lawndale at the corner of Cermak and Central Park. We do experimental theater, but since our relocation to North Lawndale, we are really viewing ourselves as a theater company in service of a community. And we've been working hard to understand exactly how, as a theater institution, we can be the best resource to the neighborhood possible. So our identity is ever evolving in answer to the needs of the neighborhood, in trying to be a point of normalcy, a long overdue point of normalcy in that community. So we are embarking on being much more than a theater at this point. We are hoping to also house a coffee shop and a bookstore. We are also open to the community to rent out the space for their own private events and parties. And we are a hub for mission-aligned organizations, so that we are not working in silos, but rather influencing each other's efforts and partnering with one another. And the whole institution is really a sanctuary against the prison industrial complex at this point. We are working with youth to try to keep them out of the school to prison pipeline. We do a lot of work inside of the prisons in Illinois. And then we are hiring as many returning citizens in our building as we can as well.
Do you participate in job fairs to hire, or how do you get your contacts to invite them to work with Theatre Y?
Well, it's been very organic. We've been working with the community for 3 years before we relocated, partnering with the Firehouse Community Arts Center, which is an organization that does violence prevention work in North Lawndale. And over the course of just meeting the community, we have made friends that are formerly incarcerated and looking for employment, and very much in line with the work that we are doing. And my work in the prison has really helped me understand what an asset these individuals can be to the community. They have knowledge and wisdom to offer that no one else can offer. And so understanding why the people that I'm working with inside Stateville would be beneficial on the outside. Whenever I meet someone who is doing that work on the outside, I'm thrilled to know them, thrilled to hold them up as an example of what is possible when a person is given back to their community. And so we have not gone searching for any of these individuals. They have walked into our doors and made Theatre Y their home, and we've just invited them to stay.
Mm. And it seems as if some of your new ensemble members or the new actors, do they form the ensemble and then they practice performing Macbeth, right?
That's right.
Is there a reason is there a connection between your work trying to address the prison industrial complex and your decision to use Macbeth as the training vehicle?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We had always wanted to be an ensemble. As a theater company, it felt important that the relationships between the artists was deepened from one project to another, and that it wasn't a reset every time we chose a new show. But we didn't know how to be an ensemble without being able to compensate our artists at the time. This was in 2015. And we brought an actor from the Théâtre du Soleil in Paris, who worked with us for a whole year on a production of Macbeth in response to Trump's bid for the White House. At the time, he wasn't elected yet, and we were all very afraid of his imminent election. And so Macbeth struck us as a play to really tackle the moment and address the fear that was in everyone's hearts about the future. And we used that production as a way of developing ensemble labor. All of the actors performed every single role over the course of the year and poured into each other's understanding of each character. And when we finally cast the show, the people who were playing each role were carrying the wisdom and the investigation of all of the actors toward that role. It was really a beautiful launching into a different way of working. And so there are ensemble members at Theatre Y who were part of that, who have stayed since that production. But it's been a way of creating a culture of how to collaborate, how to decenter yourself and put the artistic object and the collaborative process ahead of your own glory, which is pretty radical in the theater industry, I think. And so it really forged this selfless labor that we have carried forward. And the actors who were part of that original process have managed to carry the culture into the room as we grow and begin to absorb more and more ensemble members. And over the years, I would say the biggest thing that we've succeeded in doing is really welcoming individuals at any level in their artistic career. We've learned how to identify the individuals who really pull the train, the individuals with extreme talent and training who pull the train, and then the other actors who can be carried by that knowledge and that talent into their own training and knowledge. So we are an all ages cast with all different backgrounds. And I tell actors when they come into Theatre Y that the only expertise they need to have inside of this space is a lack of expertise. I'm not interested in people with a bag of tricks. I'm not interested in a formula. We always start from zero. In all the years of international collaboration, part of the logic of international collaboration has been to destabilize us as artists and to provoke us with opposite methods that don't have anything to do with how we've ever done it before, so that we're always starting at zero and really trying to imagine what can happen in this empty space this time. So the novices or the young artists help hold us to that. It's actually a gift they bring into the room with their lack of experience. They don't have to try to have a beginner's mindset. It's actually harder for the pros to return to zero perpetually.
When you started Theatre Y, at first I thought that you were the artistic director officer. So you were one of the co-founders of Theatre Y.
That's right.
What happened to help you found Theatre Y, and what was the mission at that time versus what the mission is now?
Yeah. So I was a young actor, newly graduated out of NIU with a degree in acting. And I was hired as a company member of a theater in Budapest. And I performed in Hungarian, which I don't speak, which I don't recommend, but it was quite a trial by fire. And I came into the theater world and was pretty immediately disillusioned. I felt a lack of control over my body and how it was used on stage. And so I started to fall out of love with the theater, or so I thought. And during my year contract in Budapest, I read a play called JULIET by András Visky, a one-woman show about a woman who was incarcerated with her 7 children in 1956 Romania, and how she survived and how her children brought her back to life, essentially. It was the most remarkable work I had ever read. And I wrote to the playwright and asked him if I could shake his hand and congratulate him for somehow putting on paper something unlike I'd ever seen. and he wrote me back and said, I hate Budapest. Why don't you come visit me in Transylvania? So I headed off to Transylvania to meet him. And over the course of the week-long meeting, he gave me the rights to Juliet and suggested that I do the English premiere of the play. So that felt like a commissioning. And in contrast to the, what do you call it, exploitation that I was feeling in the theater at the time, I really responded to the invitation and came back to the United States and tried to find a producer and a director. Ultimately partnered with a former professor of mine who had also been very formed by Eastern European theater. And so we went back and forth to Romania to create the play. And András came to the States for the premiere. And when he saw the play, he said, I can write you 6 more plays. You should start a company. So Theatre Y was originally created as a means of producing András Visky plays. And I should say that I should explain what an András Visky play holds. András created something called barrack dramaturgy. He was born and raised in prison. His first memories are of being thirsty. And the way he views the theater is that it is a ritual wherein we incarcerate ourselves with a group of strangers around a problem, and no one is allowed to leave until we've arrived at a new place together. So this was really the ritual that he introduced me to, and the stakes that he introduced me to in the theater, which were so refreshing in contrast to the entertainment industry. The idea of killing time, are the seats comfortable, everything that I had come to understand the public to expect from the theater. He raised the bar to this extreme level where if you demand that of the form, it will answer. But if you are not expecting that from your evening of entertainment, it will certainly not produce transformation. So he really introduced me to a different style of theater. And I would say that a lot of that has to do with the fact that formerly communist countries were not allowed to gather at all, let alone produce a play and speak their mind and their truth. The theaters were often used by the state to perpetuate propaganda. So when you go to the theater in Eastern Europe, you really do taste the holiness of the space, because the audience is grateful to have the right to gather at all. And then whatever happens next is such a gift. But as Americans who have not lost that right, we really don't value it nearly as much. And so the theater company was formed as a space for dialogue, international dialogue through theater, a space for people from all walks of life, from all lived experiences, to incarcerate themselves with one another around something that felt like a universal problem, and to demand that we as a community make have some kind of discovery in this room, or else we've wasted our time. So in that sense, the identity of the company has not shifted at all. We still use the theater to that exact purpose. There were we have a list of 20 values that kind of break down the evolution of the company according to the discoveries we made each year of what we had to add to the pile of values in order to be doing the most good we could do. So as I mentioned, we became an ensemble as quickly as we could to try to get rid of the hiring and firing practice inside of our work, and to build a community that was growing in its intimacy and ability to risk with one another. We became a free theater in 2018 because we felt like the disillusion of the churches in the country was leaving a void of spaces, public spaces for discourse between people from all walks of life at no cost. And so the theater could really step into that space without dogma and offer the same opportunity for people to gather and meet one another, and remove the otherness of the other by just meeting one another. So We became a free theater in 2018, hoping that our audiences would transform, and they didn't. We were still located in Lincoln Square, and along with 250 other theaters on the North Side. And that became a problem immediately in our estimation. So we started looking for where to relocate to in Chicago that would be more central and more accessible to all of the citizens of our city. I have a 30-year history with North Lawndale. My sister and my brother-in-law have lived here for 30 years and taught in public schools and started a youth organization that I worked at for several years. So I know many people in this neighborhood who were once very small, who are now very tall, and it does feel like a second home to me. And we happened to be invited to move into North Lawndale by a man who was wanting to create a destination attraction in the neighborhood and thought a free theater would be a great addition to that. So that was in 2020 that we were invited. That location did not pan out, but it did allow us to really start building relationships with the North Lawndale Community Coordinating Council, which is a group of 300 stakeholders who've created a quality of life plan for the neighborhood, and to ask them if there was a theater company that would arrive in North Lawndale, what would they provide? How can we partner with what you've already been working to do in this neighborhood? So that gave us a 3-year runway to our final move-in, which took place this last February, and really allowed us to imagine how we could transform ourselves into more of what the community needed. For example, the main and first thing was youth programming. Everyone said, please make opportunities for our youth. And we have not been offering youth programs or children's theater or anything of that sort in our past. We had a story time for children once a month. We would read stories to little kids, but that was the extent of our youth programming. But as I mentioned, we'd always been an all ages cast. So we were very used to having children in our productions treated and behaving much like adults. And so our thought was to just expand that model and to try to create a one-to-one mentorship program for youth, paid mentorship program for youth, so that the artists inside the company were teaching students while they were doing whatever it is they were doing at any level in the organization, from the actors to the board members to the architect. And we received funding from the Walder Foundation and Innovation 80, and started that programming 18 months ago, which is how we've gotten to the point of having a group of 15 children who are now featured in this upcoming production. But that all happened very organically. And this is now their third performance with us, some of them. So that's one initiative that was launched very much in answer to the request of the community. We were also asked to be open during the day and not just in the evening, so that there's a place for people to come inside out of the cold and out of the heat. If people aren't aware, there are very few businesses in North Lawndale, and there are 2 coffee shops at this point in the whole community, no theaters. It's just a very, there are no grocery stores. There are really so few points of normalcy in North Lawndale. And so with the 3-year runway towards our purchase, we knew that we needed to have a building that could house more than just Theatre Y, so that we could tick more of the boxes that were missing, like the coffee shop and the bookstore. And we were also told that a lot of the good work that's happening in North Lawndale is happening in silos. And if we could create a hub for mission-aligned organizations in our facility, we could really assist all of the existing efforts and give them renewed energy and relationship with one another and camaraderie. So that's another piece of our building. But then lastly, or I guess there are a couple more things. Marvin Tate is a cornerstone of our institution. He is a legend in North Lawndale, but in Chicago and beyond. He was born in North Lawndale. He's an extraordinary spoken word artist, poet, experimental musician and found object visual artist who's made quite an international career in his life, and now wants nothing more than to come home to his community and start to offer up the things that he wished were present when he was growing up there. So he will be living in our building as our artist in residence. His studio will be in our building. There's a vault in our lobby that will be his rotating gallery space so that people can come in and see what he's been working on lately. And he's really been a part of helping craft the programming moving forward based on what he, as a child in North Lawndale, could really have used in terms of experimental exposure, also allowing youth who have unusual appetites to have them stoked and nurtured in their backyard. And then the other important thing to mention is that we are not oblivious to the fact that theater companies have historically been wielded as the first line of gentrification against a community. And just because we are there wanting to support this community desperately does not mean our presence would not have the opposite effect and increase property taxes and rent. And so we're trying very hard to partner with architects and urban planners to innovate strange strategies to try to hold on to the community itself, even as we together revitalize the neighborhood. So one such idea is for our campus to be a geothermal heating and cooling pilot site, which just means that we would bury the utility lines below ground to the 55-degree level so that the heat is only being pulled up from 55 degrees and the air conditioning is already cool. And an 8-block radius surrounding our building would be able to tap into this utility line and reduce their utility costs by $1,000 per year per household, thereby having some money to put towards any increase in property value or property taxes that our presence might result in. So trying to really not wait for the other shoe to drop and to say we didn't mean for that to happen, but to say how can we innovate in some creative way to say there is a way to revitalize without gentrification. And of course that is the riddle, right? And I don't have a lot of examples of that historically, so we are very aware that we're out on a limb and doing something dangerous perhaps, but really not wanting to write ourselves out of the solutions just because we haven't seen any solutions yet, but saying how can we as creative minds, as lateral thinkers, participate in the urban planning issues that the city is facing and use all of our creative powers to come up with out of the box ideas.
I was just reading an article this morning about the loop being overheated, and then they're thinking about solutions to transport some of that heat toward thermal warming.
Oh, wow.
What is that? Could you tell us a little bit more? That really inspired my interest about that $1,000 rebate if a house in what way is connected to that thermal warming.
Yeah, it's just about how much less energy it requires to heat and cool if the utility lines are buried. So it's not something we're inventing. There is a city in Iowa, I believe, that has done this. And the city of Chicago has been recently calling for geothermal ideas. It is the wave of the future, but it has not yet been implemented. So the city is interested in us doing a pilot site as a test to see if this could be spread throughout the city as a solution for everyone.
And Theatre Y would be the pilot site, you're saying?
That is the idea, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you broken ground yet to do that?
No, it is, we are still in dialogue with the Citizens Utility Board, but they have signed on as being interested in the project. And so we're working with our architect, Trish Vanderbeck, to try to continue those plans. But we're optimistic. The fact that the city is asking for geothermal ideas tells us that we're proposing this at the time that they might actually take us up on it.
Would Theatre Y have to pay anything, or would you be able to get some grants or some kind of federal or city funding for the project?
Yeah, the hope would be grants and federal and city funding for this. Unfortunately, we are still the poorest theater company in the world because we're free, so
Yes,
we don't even make ticket money from our productions.
yes. For Theatre Y, why?
Well, originally when András and I sat down at a bar in New York and we were brainstorming ideas for the name, he wrote Theatre Y, and I said why, and he said because you can go this way or you can go this way. So it's really a symbol of divergence, and in the years, in watching the evolution of the company, I have come to believe that it is maybe the most appropriate name for this company because of the evolution that you can trace in what we become. After every production, there really is a, um, a reckoning of what it is that we knew before and why we did it, and what it is that we've learned as a result of having done it, and what it means for us moving forward, how we have to shift our methods and our approach based on what we've just learned. So it really is a continuous um, redefining or further defining, I would say, a continuous further defining of who we are, a decision making at every moment of what we will no longer be doing and what we will now be doing from this point forward. So you can trace it like a tree branch, where this year the decision was no longer to go this way but this way, and this year no longer this way but this way. And I really want us to hold ourselves to that, the idea that you do the best you can with what you know, and when you know better you need to do better. It seems like really the only way to run an institution with integrity is to perpetually rename it, reconceive it, and never hold on to any past identity out of nostalgia or habit or ignorance.
You mentioned earlier that your work affects the audience and vice versa. What is your audience's reaction to your productions? Because it seems as if all your productions want to involve the audience.
That's right. It's very important to us. As a theater, I feel that the only hope we have to survive in the age of cinema is to acknowledge the live event, the presence of the audience, the singularity of the souls that are configured in the space that evening, the unrepeatability of the night. And so we do not have a fourth wall at Theatre Y. There is no imagined gap between the audience and the actors. The actors are always looking directly into the audience's eyes, no matter whether it's Macbeth or anything else. It's not about the play itself not being a fiction. It's that the audience's presence is not a fiction, and we don't want to pretend that they're not there. So the play is very much a relationship every night with the audience, and all of the shows that we choose are a confrontation of sorts. Even if it's a joyful confrontation, it is the audience is implicated in the event. They are not passive bystanders. They're not anonymous. They're not invisible. They are there, and we want them to feel implicated in the conversation. But as a result, sometimes it's a little intense for everyone involved, who nobody really knows what's going to happen that night. And we know that what we are offering is unusual. So we have, since the beginning of this company, made the show only part A of the experience. Every performance is followed up with a conversation directly with the audience. So the artists have part A to say and do whatever it is they need to say or do. And then we turn the room over to the audience for part B. And the audience, it's their time to object, to respond, to ask any questions, to pry further. And in this way, it really serves as the community meeting point that we wanted it to be. It is not a one-sided conversation. And really, we found that the play is a provocation. It's something, it's like you set the table for the meal, but the meal very often is the conversation that follows, and the way that the audience is able to bravely ask and say things that they've not necessarily ever been given a chance to ask or say in a public space. And we all come out changed because there's so much of an X factor involved in the night. There's a whole part that we don't know when we go into it that we are going to discover together. So that staple has stayed consistent and will stay consistent no matter how we evolve moving forward. That's really a critical piece of what we are trying to offer up to the community in a response to what we crave as humans in Chicago.
It seems that in Lawndale there are a lot of problems, and then of course your productions would, in a way, address those problems. Do you have any examples of the when the conversation comes, the part B of the night, when you have that conversation with the audience? Are there any solutions that are discussed, and was there any follow through as a result of that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say one of the interesting elements of Theatre Y in North Lawndale is that we have an 18-year history elsewhere. And so our audience does, some of our audience does come from other parts of Chicago. And it does result in a very mixed audience, which is the dream. So our conversations have gotten thick and brave, I would say. And part of the experience being the person who's responsible for whatever happens, part of the experience is really having to trust strangers to care for strangers, having to believe that the people gathered in this room are going to do right by one another when given the microphone, which is terrifying in today's world, I would say. But it is repeatedly affirming, and I watch people really rise to the occasion. And so the biggest payoff, I would say, or the biggest discovery in terms of a solution is more of this, more meeting places for us to look at each other in the eyes and have hard conversations and confront one another with history and with the present and with the future. I can't say that anything beyond that solution has been arrived at in conversation, but I think that everyone in the room recognizes the profound value of discourse, cross-cultural, interdemographic discourse. You're only able to fear what you don't know. And so the more we know each other, the less we have to fear. So that's really at the core of what we are trying to forge, is spaces for us to meet one another and remove that unknown component that lurks in each of us when we isolate ourselves with other people who are like us in any way. So that's really the main solution I have found. There's also something really beautiful that happens in convergence of souls that I have only found a term in nature to describe. So as you know, there are creatures, sea creatures, who, when they gather together in a critical mass, they light up. It's called bioluminescence.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a skill that they have when they're alone. And so you would imagine the first time that they gather and light up, they're as surprised as anybody else that they even have that feature, you know? And I find humans to be the same. When humans come together, there is an ineffable mystery about what takes place in the space between them, and how they are grown by their communion with one another. So that's really at the core of Theatre Y, is just excuse after excuse after excuse to gather the community with one another, to celebrate Ubuntu, the idea that I am because of who we all are. I am not myself by myself. I don't know myself in isolation. I know myself in community. and I become most of my most self in community somehow.
Theatre Y has worked with Worldview Solutions. Could you tell us a little bit about Theatre Y's partnership with Worldview Solutions and how that ties in with your work to break down the prison industrial complex?
Yes. So Steve Bynum, who was the senior producer of Worldview for NPR for 25 years, for WBEZ for 25 years, he is the board president of Theatre Y. And a couple of years ago, Worldview was canceled on WBEZ and replaced with local news. And over Steve's 25 years of producing Worldview, he really had become an advocate of global citizenship as the only way to live in today's world. And so he has launched an organization called Worldview Solutions, which is trying to reframe the news from the traumatizing spectacle that it is today to something that would actually forge new ideas and new solutions in the world through these global dialogues. You know, maybe we don't have the solution for X, but you know, some other country in the world might have really solved that problem. And so we don't need to be the source of every solution. We just need to have ears to hear all of the global solutions that have already been arrived at. So he became the board president for Theatre Y in 2020. And he was really central to helping me understand what Theatre Y's history had to do with its future. When I first proposed that we move to North Lawndale, I was very open to the idea of letting go of the international component of Theatre Y completely and becoming hyper local. And Steve, who grew up in Auburn Gresham, the south side of Chicago, and is African American, he begged me not to do that, not to let go of the global focus of this organization, because he felt that that's what so many institutions do when they move into an under-resourced community. They hyper localize their effort and continue to cut the neighborhood off from the city and the world by doing that. That's one of the most diabolical aspects of marginalizing is that the world becomes so small for the community, and they do not view themselves as the global citizens that they are. So Steve felt very strongly that one of the things that made us a helpful asset to the community was our international relationship or relationships, and that we could help put North Lawndale on a world stage and bring the world to North Lawndale. So that is very much a part of who we hope to be moving forward. And he was really important in helping me understand what it is that we need to shed as an institution and what we absolutely should not shed. And it's been part of the prison industrial effort. As I mentioned, the very first play that started Theatre Y was about incarceration and about the idea of inner freedom and how to achieve inner freedom. András Visky really felt blessed by his incarceration as a child, because he felt that most of us need to get into middle adulthood before we realize that our incarceration or lack thereof is not based on our circumstances, but on our spirit. And so the work of the company has always been abolitionist in nature somehow. But in 2017, I survived a violent crime and had very severe PTSD. And I went to Serbia to work with some of my colleagues to create a movement therapy for trauma rehabilitation to try to bring me back into my body. And when I came back from Serbia, I had kind of survivor's guilt, a feeling that I had received more care than any other harmed person in the history of the world. And I felt like I should carry it forward somehow. And I thought about offering up the movement therapy to other women, but it really hit me that the responsible parties are also acting out of trauma, complex traumas that have not been addressed in their bodies, and that nobody is caring for the people who are incarcerated or the trauma that lives in their body. In addition to that, I was also newly afraid of men, and I didn't want the world to shrink the way I felt it was shrinking. So I started working inside of Cook County Jail and Stateville Correctional Facility, offering movement therapy for trauma rehabilitation. And in that process, I met giants, people who we have buried alive under enormous sentences with no possibility of parole, who were really responsible for putting me back together and healing my heart and restoring my faith in humanity. And at that time, I would say that my fate became tethered to theirs. I didn't know how to leave them behind when they had really been responsible for my wholeness. And so I started doing a lot of advocacy work for them, understanding that legislators often hide behind victims, saying the victims don't ever want these individuals released from prison. And so I started offering up my voice as a quote unquote victim who did not want to throw away the key, who felt that healing really only was possible when the harmed and responsible parties are able to restore their relationship with one another and not to be banished from one another. I started to understand the trickle-down effect and the harm of removing anybody from their community, the way that that exponentially increases the number of victims as a result of the crime, and understanding the fine print of our laws and the way that we have come to be one of 12 states without any system of parole or any system of reevaluating a person based on the way they serve their time. So that has really taken up a large piece of Theatre Y in a more practical way, even though artistically we were always abolitionists in our productions. We've now put some more rubber on the road in terms of our participation in the problem and trying desperately to work to reinstate parole in Illinois. We're working on a bill together with some of the men inside who have written a bill to try to bring parole back to Illinois. And tomorrow, actually, they will be performing a play that I helped them create inside of Stateville for legislators that we are hoping will be filmed and then disseminated broadly as we possibly can to try to move public opinion on the subject.
So this is stuff separate from the Wiz that the other, yes. So
Yeah.
could you could you tell us the name of the play that you are spearheading at the Stateville?
It's called Not to Be.
Not to Be. And who wrote it?
The men did. It's all of their original writing. I wove their writing together. I gave them some of the 36 questions that lead to love from the New York Times study, and they answered those questions, and I wove them together into a dialogue to discuss whether or not we even view them as humans anymore. If we are willing to bury them alive and kill them by incarceration, who are they? Are they even a person? And how can you look at them in the face and tell them that they're not? So it's really a play trying to expose their humanity to our great shame, because it seems that we have denied it.
Do you know who the audience will be?
It will be 80 other incarcerated individuals. And then we have 2 senators, and we are hoping that MK Pritzker will be in attendance tomorrow, but we will find out tomorrow.
And could you tell us which senators?
I know Villanueva, Senator Villanueva is the senator who has been spearheading our bill, and I am not sure offhand the name of the other senator.
That's okay. That's okay. Could you tell us a little bit more about your work with Marvin Tate?
Sure. So Marvin Tate was a featured artist in 2021. We did a walking performance that was a walk along the Emerald Necklace, which is the boulevard that connects all of the major parks along the west and south side of Chicago. So connecting 12 neighborhoods that are historically not viewed as terribly walkable. And in each neighborhood, we featured artists from that community as part of the performance. And Marvin was one of those featured artists. And we immediately fell in love with him and his work. We felt like his style as an artist fit right into our aesthetic and our beginner's mindset model. And so since then, he's been a part of many productions with us, including this upcoming production of The Wiz. He's been central in our youth programming as our head educator. And there's really no telling what the future will be. His appetite is broad and wide, and his skills are bottomless. So we're just kind of following the muse and trying to see exactly where he takes us. The Wiz Walk, which is the performance that we are about to open this weekend, was another direct request from the community. Whenever we asked anyone what plays they would like to see produced at Theatre Y, the most consistent answer was The Wiz. And so we thought about how to produce that show. We also just finished a production called We Are Proud to Present, a presentation about it's a very long title. It's a Jackie Sibley's jury play that was tackling racism dead on and was a very, very heavy meal to serve. And so we felt very strongly that the next meal we served had to be joy, just pure joy. And The Wiz could really tick that box. But also our walking performances that we've now done for years were originally inspired by The Wizard of Oz. We passed L. Frank Baum's house in Humboldt Park and were inspired by him and inspired by the Yellow Brick Road. And so doing The Wiz as part of our walking performance this summer is also a return to the origins of this whole performance style to begin with. Once again, just showing that it is not impossible to blend the past with the future. So we had this group of children that we really wanted to follow in this next production. As crazy as it might sound, we decided that as adults, we wanted to manifest whatever vision the kids produced and make a play that was their imagination. And rather than starting from zero with them and giving them a blank page, we thought it might be helpful to give them a well-known story that they could play jazz with. So we gave them The Wiz as the starting point and asked them, what's the story we're telling? What's the route? Where do we go? What do we do there? And so in 5 weeks, these kids, along with Marvin Tate and pianist Sharon Udo, have written an original musical. Every single word is original from them. Every song is original. And it is terribly satisfying. You would never believe what kids will do when you actually ask them a question. It's been so affirming of the decision to follow their lead because they have manifested a truly extraordinary story that is very much their own and also inspired by this classic novel. For example, the story follows two sisters, Doro and Thea, which is a change to begin with, that we're following two girls instead of one. And Marvin Tate is The Wiz. So he is very featured in this production. It's an all ages cast, the adults and the children. And it ends with a meal, which is also a staple of our walking performances. When you ask audiences to walk, it's nice to reward them at the end. This is the shortest walking performance we've ever done. Our first walking performance was 5 miles. The second one was 4 miles. The third one was 3 miles. And this one is not even a mile. So it is not the athletic endeavor that it once has been. It's much more leisurely. And it's about 3 hours in total from start to finish. Starting this Saturday, July 22nd, every Saturday and Sunday at 2 o'clock, 2 to roughly 5 or 6, includes the meal and runs through August 12th. And then our final performance will be on State Street as part of Sundays on State on August 13th at 1:30. So there are 7 full performances at Theatre Y starting this Saturday. And our tickets are free or pay what you want. When you go on our website, you can reserve your spot, which we highly recommend because there are very limited seats, or we can't be bringing crowds of people through the streets. So it is a limited number of seats that we can offer, but you can insert whatever amount, as little as 0, to reserve that spot.
What do you mean by seats? Is the audience going to be seated at certain portions of the walking route, or is the audience going to be walking with the cast, right?
Yes. So the play does start in the Theatre Y lobby. The first few scenes are in the building, so they will be seated for a moment,
Mhm.
and then they will travel out with us into the streets, walking through the streets with us, stopping at various spots for a performance, and then coming back to the theater for the last few scenes. So sometimes they are seated and sometimes they are walking.
Do you have to have any special traffic controls, any streets blocked off, or is everybody going to be on the sidewalks?
Everybody will be on the sidewalks. We are not blocking off any streets. And we keep it pretty intimate for that reason. We try to not have too many audience members. It's also challenging to be heard for the kids to be audible to a large crowd. We have to keep the crowd pretty close to them. But part of the goal with our walking performances, and part of why we started doing them at all, was to bring the theater out to the people, so that the neighbors themselves are receiving a performance, whether they reserved a ticket or came to the theater or not. It's a way of spreading the joy even beyond the theater walls, and introducing the community to the theater, making sure that they know that we're there, and making sure that they know that we have an event every single Monday night called the Monday Night Buzz. From 6 to 9, it's free. Also, there's a bar, or you can bring your own beverage, and that features 4 local artists, plus Sharon Udo, who is not local, but she's the pianist who's extraordinary. So we have a variety of events every Monday night, from karaoke to hip hop and live art performance, to Marvin Tate's more experimental sets. So we're really inviting people to make Theatre Y their living room. What else do you have better to do on a Monday night than to come and receive some art and enjoy some community at no cost? So this is all part of the legwork to try to make sure that everyone knows that this is a resource that's here, and that they are welcome.
So Monday Night Bus would be in the Theatre Y building, right?
Yes, that's right.
For the Wiz, are families allowed to register? Because if a whole family is there, that already takes up a bit of space.
Yes, absolutely. That is one of the most exciting things about this show, is that we can actually invite the whole family and trust that the whole family will be entertained, and that the whole family can manage the length of the walk. Something longer than this would have been difficult for younger children. A different play might not have been interesting for older audiences, but this really is an all ages cast for an all ages audience. We welcome families to come in full, or make it a date night or a family outing. There is nobody that is not welcome to come along for this.
What about let's see. An earlier question was about the actors. Are the actors members of the community, or the ensemble for the Wiz?
Yes, I would say that all of the actors, almost all of the actors, are members of the community. There are a couple who are coming from Rogers Park, but almost all of the actors involved in the show are from the West Side.
How many actors from Rogers Park? Because I do live in Rogers Park.
There's 2. There's 2 actors that are coming from Rogers Park.
Interesting. And your actors, are any of them returning citizens?
Yes, actually. Yeah.
And then what about how in order for you to do your work to break down the prison industrial complex, I'm sure that you also try to do some work with the schools. So how does Theatre Y connect with the local schools?
Well, we have been asked to work at Collins High School. Very recently, they reached out and said that they have an extraordinary performing arts facility, but no performing arts program. So we are working to become the staff at Collins, which would be a very direct relationship to a high school. We're also working potentially to have the same kind of relationship with North Lawndale College Prep. But our biggest connection to the high schools has been Marvin as a person who went to Farragut, and the Firehouse Community Arts Center, which is 3 blocks away from our building and now also renting out space in our building. They're the big lifeline to the community. They have a 25-year history with working with youth, and they were the ones who recruited the first kids that started in our program. We also have a longtime ensemble member, one ensemble member who started with us back when we started the ensemble around MACBETH. She is a teacher on the West Side, and she has been recruiting some of her students. And another ensemble who started way back at MACBETH works at UCAN, which is a housing facility for wards of the state. So we have a lot of different connections to various institutions in the neighborhood. My brother-in-law started YMEN, the Young Men's Educational Network, and my sister teaches at Chicago West Side Christian School. So they also are helping to recruit students that they've identified as having particular talents and appetites in the arts. They're really coming at us from all sides. And we are now also an After School Matters program. So After School Matters is also recruiting and sending children to us. So we are not short on children at this point.
Mhm. Yes. Well, getting back to Worldview Solutions and its connection with Theatre Y, there was mention on the website of new solutions and new intersections with and for BIPOC communities that Worldwide Solutions is creating with Theatre Y. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we have a documentary filmmaker who has moved into the building. He's been filming with Theatre Y since 2015, I believe. And he decided on his own that he wanted to create a documentary about the transition that Theatre Y is making from the North Side to the West Side, what that looks like, and how it's happening. I welcomed this idea early on because I felt very intimidated by the number of mistakes that I was going to undoubtedly make in this transition. And I wanted to put us on blast. I felt like the strongest and most uh, honest way of moving forward was to film everything that happens inside the building and to be the first to say, this was a mistake. No one should do this in the future when they try something like what we're doing. So Justin Jones is the cinematographer, and he's been filming almost every second of our presence and our transition. And so Worldview Solutions is geared up to be the one that will broadcast this documentary that's created. Steve Bynum is really going to leverage all of his media clout to try to maximize the impact of this document so that we can be the first to announce everything that we're learning as we're learning. And there is so much to learn. And we are so aware of our blind spots and the ways that institutions have done things like this badly. And we are not pretending that we are better than anyone who's come before us. So we're really trying to be public in the way that we're working as a way of having accountability and integrity and helping others not repeat the mistakes that we make moving forward. So Worldview Solutions is really going to be central to publishing and publicizing the work that we're doing.
In other words, you're saying that Worldview Solutions is helping document all the work of, at least most of the work of Theatre Y. Does that mean that they would have people filming as you in rehearsals and
Yes.
in production and all that?
Yes, filming all the toughest moments. The fact that Justin is present in the building really means that we cannot curate what he is filming and what he is not filming, which is the idea. He is there at all times to the point where we forget that he's there, which is ideal. You know, it's important that we're not forever performing for the cameras, but he's really captured some of the most challenging moments that we've encountered so far as an organization. And I'm really grateful that we're not trying to avoid getting canceled. We're the first canceling ourselves moment by moment as we discover that we've fallen on our faces in any way.
And so Justin Jones has been filming you since Theatre Y since 2015?
That's right.
Wow. And when will when will the entirety of at least part of it, when will the production be released?
He's guessing it's probably a 3 or 4 year endeavor. It depends. I mean, part of the problem is that he doesn't know when to stop filming and start editing because the story is ongoing. So it's a challenge to know exactly how to wrap this one up. But luckily, as he's filming, we're able to extract bits and pieces and start to share smaller bites with the public, even as he's continuing to film and as the documentary is still ongoing.
Not knowing when the ending is a common dilemma for artists, I think.
I think so.
And what about the intersections with BIPOC communities? Do you want to discuss a little bit about that? The work with the Worldview Solutions and Theatre Y and BIPOC communities, the solutions and the new intersections that you found with the BIPOC communities.
Well, Theatre Y's new building is quite fortunately located on the border between North Lawndale and Little Village. And so while we are first and foremost focused at this time on serving North Lawndale, because we really want to make clear to them that we are their living room, we are very aware that moving forward, our positioning is ideal to bridge two communities that have struggled to live side by side for quite some time. So we are eager to see how our location begins to forge the new concept. I don't know if you're aware, but during the protests and the riots in 2020, there was a lot of violence between these two neighborhoods, rather terrifying eruption of violence between these two neighborhoods. And so there was a movement started at that time called One Lawndale, and because Little Village is also called South Lawndale. So we are viewing ourselves on that border as a hosting site for such initiatives like One Lawndale. We don't belong to either. Technically, we're literally on the road that separates the two communities. And so we have had a lot of organizations come to us saying, can we host our event in your space? Because you really do not belong technically to one or the other, so that our efforts aren't seen as one-sided. They're really bridging the gap between these two communities. It's not easy to imagine how to do that exactly, but before we even moved to North Lawndale, our last production before the pandemic in Lincoln Square had Spanish subtitles or Spanish super titles like they do in the operas. And we would really like to find the funding. It's not easy to do that, but we'd like to get funding to be able to make sure that at the very least our productions are super titled in Spanish, and in time start to build relationships, as many relationships with Latinx artists as we have already with Black artists in North Lawndale. And in that way, even serve to be a meeting place between those two communities.
Do you have any Little Village actors at all in your current production, the upcoming one, The Wiz?
We do. We have one.
That's good.
Yeah.
And do you have a YouTube channel in which our listeners and I could watch some of your productions? Now you've really made me want to watch what transpired before.
Yes, we do. You can look us up, Theatre Y, on YouTube. We also have an Instagram page, Theatre Y, all one word. Facebook, Theatre Y Chicago. And our website is theater-y.com.
And what about some of your performances or all your performances for Monday Night Buzz? Are those shared on any of these platforms?
Yes, YouTube does have a lot of videos that feature some of our Monday Night Buzz events and past performances as well.
Well, I would love to share that a little later on my program. Do you know if there are any NFAs not for? Is there any profanity that I have to worry about on the Monday Night Buzz?
It's hard to say. It is a free mic. And I would say that the first Monday nights are karaoke and probably the most G-rated. But you know, our artists are very sensitive to who's in the room. I've noticed that. You know, they will take the mic and be as free as they feel is appropriate for who's present. And we have had children show up at the Monday Night Buzz, and the artists adapt. You know, they're not oblivious to who's present. So it's a living space. We really welcome children, and the artists and adults are definitely capable of censoring themselves when necessary.
Yeah, so because I was thinking about sharing some of Sharon Udo's work as well.
Oh, please. Yes, she is incredible. She is coming up tonight at 6 o'clock. Tonight is Sharon Udo's night. She plays piano and sings for 3 hours. It is a treat. She does Nina Simone tributes and her own original songs. And you can get a taste of the woman who wrote all of the music for The Wiz too this weekend, in case you want to find out just how extraordinary the musical component of the show will be. You can come tonight at 6 and get a taste.
So it's Sharon Udo that wrote all 13 songs?
That's correct.
Did she have any input from the kids?
All input from the kids. They told her what the songs needed to say. A lot of them gave lyrics to the songs that she had to work into music. Some of them even went as far as giving melodies that she had to embellish on. She really followed their lead. I mean, it is a true collaboration, and these kids take full ownership of what they're about to do.
If you know them off the top of your head, which songs have some of the kids' melodies embedded in them? Then if any of our listeners were to attend, I'm sure that they would want to just appreciate how that those couple of songs were partly created by the kids.
Yeah, I will say the first 2 songs that happen in the play were very much driven by the artists, by the kids. And the song that happens on the rooftop, I'll just put it that way.
Okay.
The song that's on the roof was very driven by the kids.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Melissa Lorraine of Theatre Y. Would you like to give us, the listeners, your contact information, and again, the information for participating and being part of the audience for the Wiz Walk, and also again for Monday Night Buzz?
Yes, so we are located at 3611 West Cermak, which is at the corner of Cermak and Central Park. Our website is theater, spelled with an R-E at the end, but honestly, we have both platforms just in case people misspell it. So theater-y.com. You can reserve tickets on our website. You can contact us directly by emailing info@theater-y.com. And what else? Facebook, you can find us on Facebook at Theatre Y Chicago, Instagram at Theatre Y, YouTube at Theatre Y. And we really encourage you to just come and taste anything that's happening on the West Side. These kids are extraordinary. I've been writing to the press lately, being very direct about how much they deserve to be put on the stage of the great city of Chicago in terms of their talent and their bravery. I have never seen a braver group of people. Just telling anyone that they wrote an original musical in 5 weeks is enough to say, just come and see the madness.
I do have another question that pop up in my head. We spoke with Arnie Duncan before, and he mentioned how important it was to take kids outside of their neighborhood so that they see that there are other worlds, and it's not only their backyard, that is the entire world. Is there anything that is happening in Theatre Y in your work that is also exposing these kids to other neighborhoods?
Yes, the last performance that they did was an original puppet production, which was featured at Chicago Shakespeare Theatre. So they were they had the experience of performing on the lake. Their dressing room had a balcony overlooking the lake with fireworks that went off after their performance, as though it was just for them. It was really special to see them take that stage. And honestly, I just have to say this because I was the first one to be shocked, but I shouldn't have been. The professionalism and sincerity and honesty that they brought to the stage at Chicago Shakespeare Theatre put all the professionals to shame. There was something so extraordinary about what they did on that stage, so much so that the Blair Thomas, the head of the Chicago International Puppet Festival, has asked that production to be a part of next year's festival, which is really unheard of. I mean, the caliber of that festival is global and extreme. And so the fact that these kids' work was so special as to get his attention and want to be featured in January on the world stage is pretty remarkable. So this is just the beginning. I mean, we've barely started working with them and they're already turning everyone's head. We're really excited to see how we can tour productions of theirs in time. The Chicago International Puppet Festival has asked us to host a Kenyan puppet performance in North Lawndale. So once again, bringing the world to North Lawndale and North Lawndale to the world. So it's already happening by virtue of their extraordinary talent. And we're really excited to see where it goes.
Is that the performance by the kids at the Shakespeare Theatre, is that also available on YouTube?
You can see excerpts of it, and we will be sharing a full link to that performance soon. We took extraordinary footage, thanks to Justin again. We got great footage of that show, and we are just editing it right now to try to share it so that people can see it.
And when was that show?
It was May 27th and 28th.
Okay, awesome. Okay, thank you so much, Melissa Lorraine of Theatre Y, founder of Theatre Y and also current artistic director officer.
Thank you so much, Trudy. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM.